Good morning, everyone. Sometimes you need to pull out all the stops and cut the BS. This is exactly what Senator Tammy Duckworth, who is a veteran and, as you know, injured in the line of fire, understands needs to be done. And I'm going to cut right to the chase and play that for you right now.
Is an effing liar. This is so clearly classified info he recklessly leaked that could have gotten our pilots killed. You say he needs to resign. Here is Secretary Hegseth dealing with those questions today.
Nobody's texting war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information. You know who sees war plans? I see them every single day.
So you think he should step down?
I do, because what he texted was the drones are going to hit, then the second sortie of F-18s will be on target. That tells the enemy exactly when the drones hit in that spot, 30 minutes later, the F-18s are going to be there. That is my concern. That's why I'm so upset as a former pilot. You know, I have a special affinity for pilots who are out there, and these men and women, thank goodness we're not injured on this mission. And I worry about future missions. I worry that our allies.
Okay, good. And this is the point. There is all this bullshit happening. We have, as you saw, the hearing the other day in the Senate. We had the CIA director. We had the director of national intelligence, right? We had Tulsi Gabbard is there. And each of them is saying, oh, no, there were no war plans. There was nothing classified. And just let's back up and say they're playing games. These were attack plans. Maybe it's not, quote unquote, a war, right? So they think they're telling the truth. No war plans. This is the same administration that is invoking the Alien Enemies Act, that is pretending that we are at war with Tren de Aragua, which is a gang from Venezuela. And there has been no war declared there, but he will invoke the Alien Enemies Act. But here, when we have Pete Hegseth in an unsecure Signal group chat that happened to include a U.S. reporter, because Waltz added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to this group chat, right? They are texting specifics. They're testing. The National Security Guard of Waltz is texting. Created this group chat to talk about this. This is set up. He inadvertently adds Jeffrey Goldberg to this group chat, but he can't take the entire fall because Pete Hegseth decided to take information that was national security information. Whether it was classified or not isn't significant legally. It may mean something in Congress, but he takes this secure information from computers at work, from systems that are locked down, and he reads it and types it in to his phone into a device that isn't secured, that should not be used for this purpose. And how do we know this? His very own Department of Defense, like a week or so before the day that he violated this policy, put out a policy saying they shouldn't do this. These guys are utter clowns, and they are putting us at risk. But guys, it gets worse. I don't know if you saw the news in Spiegel International, the German newspaper yesterday, that broke that this isn't the only security breach. Wait till you hear this. Now, I am going to share the screen for this article, and I promise you that it's not in German. because I do not speak German. So here we go. This is this article, and it is entitled, as you can see, Private Data and Passwords of Senior U.S. Security Officials Found Online. This has a byline of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reporters. Let me read you the subhead. Donald Trump's most important security advisors use Signal to discuss an imminent military strike, right? Military strike. That's what we have to say, military strike. Doesn't matter that it's war plans or attack plans. It was a planned military strike. Now reporting by Der Spiegel has found that the contact data of some of those officials, including mobile phone numbers, is freely accessible on the internet. Hey, Pete, there you are. Okay, this is the photo. The line under the photo says, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. His contact information could be found using a commercial people finder, right? Private contact details of the most important security advisors to U.S. President Donald Trump can be found on the internet. Der Spiegel reporters were able to find mobile phone numbers, email addresses, and even some passwords belonging to the top officials. To do so, the reporters used commercial people search engines along with hacked customer data that has been published on the web. Those affected by the leaks included National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, the Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Most of these numbers and email addresses are apparently still in use, with some of them linked to profiles on social media platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn. The reporters were these numbers and email addresses were used to create Dropbox accounts and profiles in apps that track running data. There are also WhatsApp profiles for the respective phone numbers and even Signal accounts in some cases. As such, the reporting by this German newspaper has revealed an additional grave, previously unknown security breach at the highest levels in Washington. Hostile intelligence services could use this publicly available data to hack the communications of those affected by installing spyware on their devices. It is thus conceivable that foreign agents were privy to the Signal chat group in which Gabbard, Waltz, and Hegseth discussed a military strike. Are you effing kidding me? Of course they were. I love journalists, but I find it hard to believe that the journalists at Der Spiegel are a step ahead of Vladimir Putin or any of our sophisticated adversaries, such as in China. Now, it's hard to explain to you not just how bad this is, but the fact that these people aren't resigning and that instead they decide to try to smear the journalist and still think this story is going to go away. They have one job. It is to keep us safe. And instead of doing that, Pete Hegseth is doing a job of what he thinks as he said on camera. I was keeping people informed. It was an update. Dude, that's not your main job. You're the Secretary of Defense, and you're supposed to defend the country. And when you're engaging in military strikes, you're supposed to protect the information, protect the people who work in the U.S. military, the pilots, from harm's way, to protect our intelligence sources and so on. That's your job. Now, as for communicating, if they hadn't fired so many people, maybe they would have had someone who was sophisticated enough on the staff to know that that is not the form of communication that would keep us safe. I want to add Senator Ossoff again today with more information and his perspective on this complete clusterfuck.
That's actually one of the reasons I think it's so important to go right at him. First of all, we have this spiral toward strongman rule and authoritarianism in the United States. In his first few months, he's purged the government of independent watchdogs, filled the most powerful offices with personal loyalists. He's commanded them to go after his opponents. We're seeing the use of fear and intimidation against the political opposition, unlike anything, I think, in our republic's history.
Part of going directly at Donald Trump is not letting up. We're not going to talk today about the tariffs, which, by the way, the United Auto Workers, UAW, United Auto Workers Union, supports. We're not going to today talk about Donald Trump's really bizarre presentation or address to women, in which he said some really off-the-wall things about fertilization. I just said it, but we're not going into detail. We are going hard on the main thing here, which was the completely sloppy, dangerous, inane, imbecilic way in which they went about this military strike in Yemen, number one, and number two, the cover up and the lies. All of these people who I just named, Tulsi Gabbard, Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, and also John Ratcliffe, should all resign if they had a shred of decency. I want to add for you, though, Donald Trump and others keep saying this was such a successful military strike, right? And what exactly was this strike, right? And when you hear the details about it, you hear the details about this at the Signal Group. I want to say that we are missing part of the story. This attack that was being discussed in such a cavalier way in this group chat on Signal involved an attack on a civilian residence, okay? This so-called Houthi PC small group channel, so that's a PC private chat small group channel. They said that Mike Waltz had said, the national security advisor, right? He said that it was successful, and he claimed that this strike had taken out key Houthi leadership, including their head missiler. And he claimed we hit their headquarters. This was he said this on Sunday before the Goldberg revelations about the Signal chat. Waltz had said we hit communications nodes, weapons factories, even some of their over-the-water drone facilities. However, what they didn't say, in which what was revealed now in this group chat, is that in order to kill this Houthi leader, those people in that chat, apparently under Donald Trump's authorization, approved and did completely destroy a civilian apartment building. So this was this target was basically they saw this leader walking in to the apartment building where his girlfriend resided. And so once they had him ID'd, that is when the building collapsed. This is in the group chat, the moment when JD Vance said, excellent. Okay. That doesn't seem very excellent to me. And so I think, I know it's not often, the place, I guess, of some pundits to criticize the way in which a military operation or the goals of a military operation, but I think we need to look at this whole situation as a whole. There is a bright light on this shining, and this is very disturbing. Now, Ossoff is also talking about a climate of fear. I want to continue his conversation from Midas so we can then talk a little bit more about this climate of fear. Here we go.
And he's so consumed by his efforts to secure revenge and to crush his enemies and, conquering Greenland, that he's doing nothing for the people who elected him. His entire domestic agenda is tax breaks for the wealthy, rounding up immigrants, revenge, and centralizing as much power as he can in the presidency.
Okay, so let's talk about rounding up immigrants. There's a lot going on here. And before I get to what's happening in Judge Boasberg's court involving the planes that were carrying alleged gang members who were Venezuelan citizens to El Salvador to work in these essentially slave labor death camps, before we get to that, I want to talk to you about something that happened yesterday that is beyond alarming. Okay, this happened in Boston, near or on the Tufts. This happened, I'm sorry, I believe either in Boston or on the Tufts University campus. What happened is there is a PhD student who attends Tufts University, and she was essentially pulled off the street by people who were apparently ICE or immigration authorities. And when this happened, they were in plain clothes. Her name, by the way, is, I just want to be clear, her name is Rumeysa Orzturk. I'm sorry. Ms. Orzturk is a Turkish citizen, and it was in the evening, and she was heading out to break her Ramadan fast, and this was on Tuesday night. The video came out yesterday on Wednesday. She was detained by agents at that time. I'm going to share with you the footage of that, and I have it right here. It is extremely disturbing. And then we'll talk about what more we know about this incident. Just to be clear, this happened Tuesday night. And yet, as of yesterday afternoon or midday, her lawyer had already filed in court a petition to have her released, but no one knew where she was. Now it turns out, we learned last night, that she is in that facility in Louisiana. I believe it's the same place where Mahmoud Khalil is. Okay, let's play this, you guys.
Yep, we're gonna take it right to the car. Come on, I'll show you everything. Okay, sure. Yep, you're fine.
I understand you. I understand it's scary. Where the police? Where the police?
Where the police?
Yeah, you don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces? Why are you hiding your faces?
Yep. Okay, take everything. Yep, I'm gonna get the doctor.
Yeah, we're gonna take a look.
I see some faces here. How do I know this is the police? It's like, hey, you're a police like me.
People being disappeared off the streets. This is unbelievable. I want to share with you now some of the reporting right now on this, the latest reporting from the New York Times. So you just saw that video. I'm not gonna play that again, but this was surveillance footage. So some sort of camera on the side of the building. Again, Rumeysa Ozturk. And she is apprehended by plainclothes agents. You can tell when, let me just 1 second. You can tell that she's frightened. At some point, you can hear the audio of her, and I don't know if the audio that matches this is from a friend who was, or a bystander, because usually surveillance cameras are just videos, but we have audio there, and we have audio indicating that she seemed frightened. She asked, can I call the police? They say they are the police. They said they're going to explain things. Someone you hear on the street saying, why are you covering your faces? This is extremely frightening, obviously. Now, I want to share more. I'm gonna blow this up so you can see this story better in the New York Times. Okay, so this also has many bylines. So this was an international student in a graduate program at Tufts University, was taken into federal custody on Tuesday outside an off-campus apartment building, according to the university president and an attorney representing the student. The student, Rumeysa Ozturk, a Turkish citizen, had a valid student visa as a doctoral student at Tufts, according to a statement from her lawyer. Ozturk, who is Muslim, was headed out to break her Ramadan fast with friends Tuesday night when she was detained by agents from the Department of Homeland Security near her apartment in Somerville, Mass. Excuse me, yes, that was Somerville. If you know, I lived in Somerville. It's a neighborhood right next to, contiguous with Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where Somerville is. Okay, we are unaware, and by the way, you can walk from Somerville onto like the Harvard campus, etc. Okay, and Tufts is a little bit farther. I'm not exactly sure how far she would have been, but she's in an off-campus apartment from her university. We are unaware of her whereabouts and have not been able to contact her, the lawyer said. And this article was printed yesterday, right? We are unaware of her whereabouts and have not been able to contact her, the lawyer said. No charges have been filed against her to date that we are aware of. And according to a spokesman for Homeland Security yesterday, they said that Ozturk had, quote, engaged in activities in support of Hamas, considered grounds for visa issuance to be terminated. Now, the only thing that we know of, let me just stop sharing for a moment. The only thing that we know of that we've seen reported is that she wrote an op-ed with another student calling on the school to do things like divest from their investments in Israel. I'm not for divestment. I'm also not for this brutal war that Israel is prosecuting in Gaza. I think it's an epic humanitarian disaster. I don't know that I would use the word genocide. I don't think it matters if I do. It's brutal. It's uncalled for. I understand the attack that was done after October 7th. And I think that, as I have said before, Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't care about the hostage families. He's using this in the same way Donald Trump is to try to clear out Gaza and deny Palestinians human rights, full citizenship, and their own nation. The official policy of the United States is still 2 states, 2 equal states. And that doesn't seem to be what is happening at any rate. There's no evidence that she did. First of all, even if, let me just put it clearly, even if, as someone with a student visa, even if there is, especially if there is evidence that she did something that is against the US law, let's say they have credible evidence that she provided funding to Hamas, or that, for example, I don't know, she engaged in white-collar crime of the type that Donald Trump did. Remember, he was convicted for 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. Let's say she has committed 34 felony counts of business record falsification. It doesn't matter. She is entitled to some level of due process. So if they have the goods on her, they should have charged her, but they didn't. They grabbed her and pulled her off the street. Okay, I'm going to continue sharing my screen with you so that we can find out a little bit more. By later in the evening, we learned from ICE records, according to the New York Times, that she was being held in a Louisiana detention center. Okay, so late on Tuesday, Judge Indira Talwani of the Federal District Court in Massachusetts ordered the government, and this court would have been, there's two buildings, there's one in Springfield, one in the Boston area. So this is out of Boston. This judge, federal judge in Boston, ordered that the government not move her out of the state, meaning out of Louisiana, without advance written notice to the court. It's not immediately clear. It wasn't clear on Wednesday whether the government had provided written notice of her removal from Massachusetts. So her lawyer filed a court petition asking a judge to determine whether this detention was lawful. And they named in this lawsuit Patricia Hyde, who is the acting director of ICE, the ICE field office in Boston, and other agents. Now, I need to continue from here because it gets continually upsetting. What did the university do? Can you imagine being a student at Tufts? So the president of Tufts, Sunil Kumar, wrote an email to the entire university community and said a couple things: that the administration had no prior knowledge of this plan to detain the student, and they did not share any information with the federal authorities ahead of time. Like they didn't share where she lived, etc. And then this is what he added: we realize that tonight's news will be distressing to some members of our community, particularly the members of our international community. So Ms. Ozturk was listed, again, this is what I mentioned earlier, as one of several authors of an opinion essay published last March in the Tufts student newspaper. The essay criticized university leaders for their response to demands that Tufts, quote, acknowledge the Palestinian genocide, end quote, and divest itself from companies with ties to Israel. So she was targeted for deportation by the Trump administration. Similarly, we saw yesterday, equally alarming, a student from the University of Alabama, Ali Reza Daroudi, an Iranian citizen, doctoral student, was also detained off campus by federal immigration officials, and it wasn't clear why that student was targeted. It's happening, my friends, and it's not okay. I was having a discussion with some students in the hallway about this, and these particular students were somewhat conservative in terms of not, hadn't really thought through the implications. They didn't really understand fully, you know, I don't want to say what the big deal, they were upset about the student situation, but they didn't know that Mahmoud Khalil, they didn't know that no charges had been filed against him when he was pulled out of his apartment building. They had heard about Ozturk and they were upset about that. Yet they didn't, when I asked, they finally got it when I kind of explained to them that we should all be scared. I said, I'm a US citizen. I said, are you? They are. I said, well, if you think that someone with a green card or someone who is otherwise in the US under some sort of visa or permission or permanent residency status, if you believe that, let's say, the authority under which someone like Marco Rubio thinks he's exercising his authority to remove people, or in the case of the Alien Enemies Act, even if you believe this is lawful authority that can be exercised, and if you believe that under that authority, things like visas and green cards can be revoked, and if you believe under that authority that people can be deported, even if you believe that, and that is a big stretch, right? Because we don't know the answers to those particular questions. Even if you believe that, I said, shouldn't there be a threshold question as to whether you are or are not in a group that could be deported. And I think they finally got it, because I said, like, shouldn't you be able to at least show, or they should look into the system to see if you have a US passport? Shouldn't they have to at least have probable cause that you committed a crime and therefore were somehow a danger to the US under these statutes? I mean, and again, I'm concerned about this language in the Immigration and Nationalization Act that apparently gives the Secretary of State full reign to designate people as dangers. I believe that under due process principles, that there has to be some kind of notice and a hearing. I do think there should be, obviously, the requirement that you cannot just walk up to someone in plain clothes and pull them off the street and disappear them out of state. Seems like a big problem without any kind of notice or a hearing or evidence against them. We have a constitution for a reason. And again, I'm concerned about the people we're talking about, but just kind of trying to make clear to people that if they can do this to these folks, they can do it to anyone. And I want to add this thing. I align myself with the people who are pulled off the street. They are not the other, right? Now, although I haven't criticized Israel in the way that she has, I have criticized the Trump administration. Is there some law on the books somewhere that could put me in jeopardy? There is a reason that I do not cross the border and see my Canadian relatives, because I'm afraid about getting back in. You know my social media presence. You know, I've organized marches against Donald Trump. I am friendly with people who have sued him. I will condemn him until I breathe my last breath. So I align myself with people who are just pulled off the street, right? At this point, as a US citizen, I still feel safe, but none of us should feel safe for too long, because who's to say? I don't walk around with my passport on me, and now I am beginning to think that I should. And if you don't think that feels like Nazi Germany, then I've got a thing coming to you. Show your papers, right? I mean, come on, man. This is frightening. Now, the only good news I have to share with you is there have been giant protests in support of Ozturk. And I think that's truly a positive development. Now, the other positive development, guys, is this. April 5th, mass mobilization. There are more of us than there are of these dictators and dictator wannabes at the top of this dangerous fascist regime. And the Hands Off rally, you can go to handsoff2025.com. You can also go to Indivisible's website. This is going to be huge. It's important. We must come together, I believe. So check that out. Now, yesterday, I had my friend Chara Torres-Spelisi on the show, immigration law expert, and she was talking about that EO, the executive order. I'm sorry, did I say immigration law? I meant to say election law expert. I hope I said that. I'm switching gears. She's talking about this executive order that would give the federal government the power to oversee, operate, and local elections, even local elections that have nothing. Well, let me just put it back up. She pointed out that this so-called executive order, which should not have the force of law, contradicts provisions of the U.S. Constitution, which gives the states the power to oversee elections. And I'm speaking very generally. I want to add to this a really good interview with Mark Elias and Alicia Menendez from yesterday and on MSNBC to talk about what he's going to do to bring challenges to stop this in its tracks. Let's listen.
26 is under attack. I don't think Donald Trump's going to be able to cancel the elections, but I do think he wants to attack free and fair elections in every way he can. And I think it's going to be quite alarming and quite surprising to many people to see how far he's willing to go. This executive order itself is sort of a fever dream, right? He doesn't have the authority to do the things he claims to do, but he is going to try to bully and intimidate his way. But you are right. He is going to face lawsuits. I can promise him that, and he's going to lose those cases.
Let's talk about that promise, your first steps in the legal fights against this.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I have never been shy to say when I think Donald Trump or Republicans have crossed the line of the law. And when I say that we're going to sue, I mean, we're going to sue. And so I expect, probably as early as next week, you will start to see lawsuits by various organizations, some of which we may very well represent and others that we don't, to challenge this, because the president of the United States, as you point out, does not have a role in the constitutional system to regulate federal elections. Article 1, Section 4 says that the states do that, subject to legislation passed by Congress. Nowhere does it mention the president. On top of that, Congress has passed a series of laws, and it is the president's obligation to take care that they are faithfully executed, and that's his only role there. So a lot of this is bluster. A lot of this is what I call, in something I wrote for Democracy.com earlier today, is performance art. He is sort of performing for his base. But it is very serious, Alicia, in that he is going to attack free and fair elections in 2026 in ways we have never seen done before. And we all need to be steeled for that reality, because the thing he fears most is that he will be held accountable at the ballot box.
Okay. When Mark Elias tells us that we need to be concerned, I listen. This is in our face now. There is no question that our institutions have not held. We are at the point we are at. We can turn this around, but of course, it is essential. It is essential that we don't do what I think we thought we could do, which at the beginning, after the election this year and before he was sworn in, we thought, you know what, I've done my part. I'm taking a break. I don't think that is an option anymore. I really don't. I think we need to all in this together and show solidarity. So I want to show you the spontaneous rallies to protest Öztürk's removal, basically kidnapping, essentially, detention, what appears to be an unlawful detention, in my view, by these plainclothes officers. I'm going to show you what people did in support of her and to stand up against disappearing people from our streets. Here we go. Someone shouted, we need to be organized. This was a spontaneous rally yesterday in, I think it's called Powder Square, which is in Somerville, I believe. This is what I was reading. This is super important, guys. And I think now is probably a good moment before we get to Crazy Town, to return to some of our basic principles here. And that is going to have to be our PRISM concept, right? We need to pay attention to our physical health, our relational health, our intellectual health, our spiritual health, and our mental health. And it is now more than ever that those things are under stress, because, physiologically, I think we know that stress triggers the cortisol hormone, and it actually repletes, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to stop there, but I feel like it repletes our systems of replenishment. And of course, this is stressful. And I think one thing that is helpful when this feels stressful is to know that we are not alone. And also to know, and this may be hard to hear, But societies that have engaged in horrific behavior move on and try to repair the damage. I'm thinking about Germany. Germany is no longer under fascist leaders. Germany engaged in, the Nazi regime engaged in horrific acts, no question. 6 million of my people, 3 million additional people. And I should say all of them are my people, but I'm specifically saying, 6 million Jews slaughtered. The war ends in 1945. Around, I guess, when was it? I'm trying to think of when I went. Less than 40 years later, 30 plus years later, I went to Germany with a dance troupe. And it was a different country by then. Although I have to tell you, the police sirens that played, the sound of the police sirens were the same as the sound of the police sirens in the Anne Frank movie, and that freaked me out. I was a little scared being a young Jewish kid. I guess that would have been in 1984 on this dance trip to Europe. But it changed. It reformed. Does it take away the slaughter? Does it take away the reality of genocide? It doesn't. We are now in a position where it's hard to predict what happens next. But there will be an after. Now, you may say to me, oh, Jen, you're telling a really nice story, but I've also seen countries like North Korea, you might say, or countries like China, where it's still under authoritarian rule. And I'll tell you why I think that's different. Again, I'm not a political scientist. I'm just making some observations. In the case of a country like North Korea, what they're able to do there to maintain authoritarian control is almost through like a divine right of king situation. It's from grandfather to son to grandson, right? This is a family dynasty, and that is part of the problem. You may say, well, what about Russia? Okay, so what do I see the differences between North Korea, China, and Russia? I see histories there in those nations of authoritarian rule going back. Let's separate North Korea for a second. In Russia and in China, there was never a society that experienced the kind of freedom that we have, okay? And I know that for some people, freedom took a much longer fight. And freedom is a concept. But Americans will not put up with this. And I don't think that Donald Trump will be able to pass the reins on to Don Jr. so easily. So, I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here even debating whether we are in for the end of democracy and decades, if not centuries, of authoritarian rule is where we are now. I don't see it. I don't see that happening. I see us getting out of this. But if we don't, does life not still go on? I mean, that's where we are. So I'm not betting against the American people, not now and not ever. I think that we won't put up with this shit for much longer. I think when the Social Security checks don't come in, that not everybody is going to be like Howard Lutnick's mother-in-law, that we are going to speak out. I believe change is coming, but I don't want to deceive you into believing this is not fascism. We are now in a very sorry state, entirely predictable when we let Donald Trump have a second term. And when we let so much money, I could say the US Supreme Court, let so much money flood into the political process. Elon Musk is the logical result of the 2010 Citizens United decision and the subsequent Speech Now decision. And here we are. And so how do we get out of this? We need to get through it. We need to hopefully have free and fair elections, and somehow overthrow this regime peacefully, of course, replace them. We need regime change and we need major reform. Louis Brandeis said something to the effect of, we can have large concentrations of wealth or we can have democracy, but we can't have both. That's still a fact. Okay, now it is time for Crazy Town. Crazy Town today is not a video. It's an "Are you fucking kidding me?" RFK Jr.
9:21 a.m.
Oops. And that was my watch telling me the time. So this is Justin Wolfers. He is a professor of economics at University of Michigan. He shared this here. Okay. And then he shared Carl Bergstrom's tweet or skeet on Blue Sky. So the guy leading RFK Jr.'s vaccine autism study, a total quack who was previously charged for practicing medicine without a license to use. Okay, so what was he doing? He was not a doctor, and he was prescribing chemical castration drugs on autistic children. Yes, this is unbelievable. And the article dates back to 2018. Here's the headline: Maryland Physician Board charges promoters of dangerous autism therapy. A prominent promoter of treating autism with Lupron, a chemical castrator, has been charged with practicing medicine without a license by the Maryland State Board of Physicians. In charges filed this week, the board described how David Geyer, who holds only an undergraduate degree in biology, allegedly diagnosed and treated children with autism. His protocols included Lupron, a hormone suppressor used for prostate cancer, precocious puberty, and to chemically castrate sex offenders. Friends, we need to stop the madness. I mean, all of them need to step down. RFK Jr., but especially this guy, Geyer, leading a vaccine study. Okay, this is at the top of my list. In addition to not keeping us safe, harming our children is at the top of my list. I am going to get on the phone with my elected officials and give them a piece of my mind. I'm also making plans for April 5th. So guys, that is the show. That is the Crazy Town. I will see you tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening.